Now, the whole leadership journey for me, really, when I was 19 years old, I had the wonderful privilege of volunteering in Russia with the Salvation Army when it re-entered after the Soviet Union collapsed, and the churches were invited back in. And I had the incredible privilege of just being like a gopher, like a personal assistant to an officer I affectionately call Captain America. I call him Captain America because he was American and he was a captain. You see what I did there? But also I call him Captain America because he is like strong, 6'4" and chiseled and like in charge and like in a uniform. When he walks into a room, he says jump, you say how high? And he was also just a remarkably gifted leader. He was charismatic, he was a deal maker. As a matter of fact, he had arranged for all of the leftover B-ration soldier food that was left after the first Gulf War to be shipped to the Salvation Army in Moscow to be distributed by them. And at the same time, he had arranged for Boris Yeltsin to declare the Salvation Army the official social services center for Moscow, including an office in the Kremlin. I mean, the man was a legend. He was Captain America. And while I was there, he had to go home, raise some more funds and stuff, and visit his family. And so they were sending in a replacement for him. And they asked if I would stay on to kind of help smooth things along and drive the car and get her some coffee. And I said it'd be an honor. So I remember the day it happened. I was standing at the tarmac waiting for Commissioner Ingrid Lindbergh, her name was, to replace Captain America. And I watched kind of with horror as she descended from the plane. I mean, she just emerged small, old, just tiny, wrinkled and shriveled and like happy but nice. I remember her kind of like shuffling over to me and taking me by the hand and saying, "You must be Danielle. I am so pleased to meet you." And I remember my mouth saying, "I'm pleased to meet you too," but my heart saying, "We're gonna die." Like, what was the Salvation Army thinking? I just was like, this is the end of the world as we know it. They've just replaced Captain America with my grandma. So I explained to her that the events of the next day were just so important. We were going to this secret prison. It was infamous in the heart of Moscow, and no one had arranged to be able to get in there except for Captain America. And he had made this trip possible, and he'd made this deal with these reporters because no one could get access, so they made a deal with us to come with us on the trip. So I said, tomorrow, we're right on track. And she said, yes, I've been briefed. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the morning. So I remember I went and picked up Time Magazine, Newsweek reporters in the back of the car, and I'm driving around, and I go pick up Commissioner Ingrid Lindbergh. She gets in the car, and we're driving. And as we're driving to this prison, these two reporters, they start chatting, as only cynical American reporters can do, outdoing each other in the infamous horror of these prisons that they can't wait to expose, just like exchanging these like terrible stories and their like excitement about getting in on this trip so they could finally, tell the truth and expose the warden and all sorts of things. And I'll never forget Commissioner Ingrid Lindbergh looking at me and saying, "Pull over the car." My immediate thought, of course, was that she probably had to pee. She's old and she's female, so. And so I pulled over the car dutifully, and then I just walked with like shock and horror as she said to these reporters. She turned around, she spoke to these guys. She said, "Look, I just feel like you haven't been properly briefed." And they look at her. She says, "See, I feel like you're not really quite on board with the mission of the Salvation Army. See, I called the warden this morning," she said, and I assured him that we were coming with good news. We were coming with hope. We really, literally were coming with light bulbs for people living in the dark. We were coming on this mission with Jesus. I remember when she said the word Jesus, I was like, ah, she said Jesus. She said, "I just feel like no one's properly, like I promised the warden we were coming with hope, with good news. It feels like you're not on board." So she said, "One, I wanted to brief you. And two," she said, "I wanted to give you an opportunity, if you can't get on board with our mission, to get out of the car." remember dying inside? What just happened? Like, I just remember thinking Captain America's gonna be so disappointed in me. And these reporters, I've never seen anything like it. These cynical American, mature, experienced reporters just shrunk into 6-year-old boys. They just went, we're so sorry, ma'am. We're on board, ma'am. We promise, ma'am. We promise, ma'am. We're like, please don't make us get out of the car, ma'am. You know, just. And I was like thinking to myself, who has to pee now, you know? We got to this prison. I'm not even kidding you. These reporters, I've never seen anything like it. They're tapping her on their shoulder. Do you think it would be okay if we took a picture over there? Do you think it'd be okay if we talked to that person over there? It was unbelievable. Then that night, you know, Time Magazine reporter, he faxes through to our office the final report that he's written for Time Magazine. He writes on the top of the report, for the commissioner's approval. I said, who made her the editor of Time Magazine? Like, how did this just happen? The next morning, he's leaving town. He comes in, he says, do you think the commissioner would have time to see me? I said, I'll check her very busy and important schedule. And I show him in, you know. She says, can I help you? He said, you know, I was just wondering, she said, if you could pray with me one more time. You know, she said, when you prayed in the van that day, I just felt something different. She said, would you pray with me before I have to leave town again? And that was the day for me, that was the moment for me when the trajectory of what it meant to be a leader changed forever. That was the day when I actually decided I really didn't want to be Captain America. I wanted to be a retired grandma. Everything changed. And actually, I kind of started at that moment in my life. I'm so thankful that God gave me the opportunity to see the difference between spiritual leadership and just good, regular leadership. And I started to actually aim and work in that direction. And I stumbled across a story in the Bible that helps explain how it happens. It's been so instrumental for me because, I mean, she had all those years to work on it. And I was always saying, like, what are the keys? How does this happen? How do we make a transition from just really good, gifted, charismatic leaders to spiritual authority? How do we make that happen?